He slid the divorce papers across the polished mahogany table, the ink still wet. "This is it, Serafina?" Marcus Thorne sneered, his $5,000 pen dropping with a clatter. "Your last taste of the good life. Enjoy the bus." He laughed, a short, cruel bark that echoed in the silent courtroom. He believed he had won. He believed he had bankrupted her, taken everything. But as he leaned back to savor his victory, the judge cleared her throat, picked up a different document, one sealed with wax, and said, "Before we conclude, the court is compelled to read the final will of Mr. Arthur Hayes." Marcus froze. The trap he never saw was about to spring. The penthouse at 145 Beacon Street was less a home and more a museum of Marcus Thorne's success. It was all glass, steel, and cold white marble, overlooking the Charles River in Boston. And for Serafina Sarah Hayes Thorne, it had been a beautiful prison for 8 years. Marcus found her when she was curating a small, brilliant exhibit on Renaissance art restoration. He was magnetic, ambitious, and radiated the kind of ruthless energy that Boston's old money found distasteful, but new money found intoxicating. He hadn't been wealthy then, not really. He was just a high-leverage trader with an appetite. What he saw in Serafina was not her quiet intelligence or her passion for art. He saw her name, Hayes. Her father, Arthur Hayes, was a legend, a recluse, the founder of Hayes Strategic Holdings, a firm so opaque and powerful it was spoken of in whispers. Marcus married the name, and with it he assumed the fortune. "Sarah, darling," he'd say, patting her hand at a gala, "tell your father we must play golf." "He doesn't golf, Marcus. You know that," she'd murmur. Right. Well, have his people call my people. We're family now." But Arthur Hayes never called. He despised Marcus from their first and only meeting. "He's a vulture, Serafina," Arthur had warned her, his voice rough from a lifetime of cigars. "He doesn't look at you. He assesses you. There's a difference." Sarah, blinded by what she mistook for charismatic ambition, hadn't listened. Now, 8 years later, the chill in their marriage was colder than the Boston wind. Marcus had taken control of her finances, citing her artistic temperament as unfit for managing the portfolio he assumed her father provided. She was given an allowance. Her restoration career was dismissed as a cute hobby, and she was pressured to abandon it. Her life shrank to charity boards and silent dinners, where Marcus would hold court, telling stories of his genius, his acquisitions, his inevitable rise. Sarah became a ghost in her own home, a pale, lovely accessory. The first crack in the facade appeared on a Tuesday. Marcus was in a meeting, and his personal laptop, usually locked down like Fort Knox, was open on his desk. A notification popped up from a Chloe Jensen. It wasn't the message that caught Sarah's eye, but the attached image, a wire transfer confirmation. $75,000. The subject line was, "For the new condo, darling. Can't wait." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She sat at his desk, her hand trembling so hard she could barely use the trackpad. It took her 10 minutes to find the folder. It was labeled Contingencies. It wasn't just Chloe. It was investments in Chloe's interior design company. It was trips Sarah wasn't invited on. It was a parallel life. But worst of all, she found another subfolder. Hayes liquidation. Inside were emails between Marcus and his lawyers, strategies for how to manage the dissolution of Hayes' Strategic Holdings upon Arthur's death. Her father had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 6 months prior. Marcus wasn't just cheating on her. He was waiting for her father to die so he could liquidate her entire legacy. He wasn't a vulture. He was a maggot, feasting on a body that wasn't even cold. That night, she confronted him. She didn't scream. Her voice was a low, dead thing. Chloe Jensen, she said, holding up the printed wire transfer. Marcus didn't even have the decency to look guilty. He sipped his Macallan 25, swirling the amber liquid. Ah, you've been snooping. That's disappointing, Sarah. You're stealing from me, from my family. He laughed. He actually laughed. Stealing? Darling, it's called asset management. I'm protecting our future from your father's archaic business model. And as for Chloe, well, a man has needs. Needs you haven't been interested in fulfilling for a very long time. I want a divorce, she whispered, the words tasting like ash. Marcus set his glass down. His eyes went flat and hard. No, I want a divorce. And you've just made a very stupid mistake. You think you can fight me? You, who hasn't earned $1 in 8 years. You, who has no idea how money even works. He stood up and walked to the great glass window, his silhouette black against the glittering city. Your father is dying, Sarah, and from what my accountants can see, his company is a house of cards. He's leveraged to the hilt. When he goes, that great legacy is going to be a pile of debt. He turned back to her. You have nothing. You are nothing without me. If you behave, I'll be generous. I'll let you keep a few of your mother's paintings. If you fight me, I will erase you. I will take this penthouse. I will take the art. I will take your name. And I will leave you with nothing but the clothes you're standing in. Arthur Hayes died 3 weeks later. The funeral was a grim, elegant affair. Marcus was the perfect picture of the grieving son-in-law, his hand firmly on Sarah's back, accepting condolences from people he'd only just met. Sarah was numb, her grief a heavy, suffocating blanket. But her grief was laced with a cold, sharp memory, her last conversation with her father. It was in the sterile white room at Mass General. Arthur was skeletal, a fallen titan tethered to a dozen machines, but his eyes were still the sharp, calculating blue of a hawk. He served you papers, Arthur rasped. It wasn't a question. Sarah just nodded, tears welling. He says you're bankrupt, Daddy. He says the company is worthless. He's trying to take everything. Arthur gave a weak, dry chuckle that turned into a cough. Good. Let him. What? Let him think. He's the smartest man in the room. Vultures only strike when they smell death. Let him smell it. I don't understand. I'm scared. Arthur fumbled for a button, and his private lawyer, Gideon Croft, a man who looked like he'd been carved from old, wise granite, entered the room. He was holding a thick, leather-bound document. Serafina, her father said, his voice finding a sudden, hard strength. I am not a good man, but I am a thorough man. I knew what this boy was, the day he shook my hand and his eyes. His eyes scanned the value of my watch. He motioned to Croft. You're going to sign this. It's my will, but it's different. It's a trap, Sarah, a very, very expensive trap, and the bait is you. What does it do? It does nothing, Arthur said, as long as you are married to him. As long as he has a shred of a claim on you, on my legacy. This will remain sealed, and my assets frozen in a corporate bond. Gideon Croft spoke, his voice a low baritone. The will stipulates, Miss Hayes, that its terms are only to be executed at the precise, legal, and finalized dissolution of your marriage. It is unconventional, but it is ironclad. He thinks you're penniless, Arthur whispered. He must continue to think that. He must be the one to drive the divorce. He must be the one to sign first. His greed must be the engine of his own destruction. But what about me? In the meantime, he's freezing my accounts. He's showing me documents, proofs of debt, falsified. Croft said calmly. "We've been feeding his sources a steady stream of misinformation for a year. We let him discover the bad investments. We let him find the secret leverage. Mr. Thorne is a competent trader, but he's an amateur shark in a tank with a great white." Arthur gripped her hand. His was cold. "This will be hard. He will try to humiliate you. He will make you small. He will grind you into the dust because it will make him feel big. You must let him. You must endure the performance, Sarah. Promise me. Endure the performance until the final act. I promise, Daddy." "Good," he breathed, sinking back. "Now, tell me about that Botticelli you found. The one with the flawed pigment. I liked that story." She had sat there for 2 hours, holding his hand, telling him about 15th century art, while the legal bomb that was his last will and testament sat waiting in Gideon Croft's briefcase. 2 weeks after the funeral, Marcus made good on his promise. "The reading of the will was a disappointment," he announced, walking into their bedroom. He was wearing a new suit. "As I predicted, your father's company is insolvent. Worse, it's in debt. As your husband, my assets are now exposed to his creditors." Sarah played her part. "No, that can't be. It is. I'm afraid I have to protect myself. I'm selling the penthouse to cover the initial losses. My lawyer, Bradley Fiscali, has drawn up the divorce settlement. It's fair, considering I'm taking on all this family debt." He threw the file on the bed. "I'm keeping the Beacon Street property, obviously, as it's now a corporate asset I have to manage. I'm keeping the art as collateral. The cars, the liquid accounts, all tied up. What? What's left for me? I'm being generous, Sarah," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "I'm giving you the condo in Palm Beach." She knew that condo. Her father had bought it for her mother years ago. "And," he added, "I'm prepared to offer a one-time payment of $50,000 for you to get back on your feet. It's more than you deserve. My lawyer says I could sue you for your father's debts." He was stripping her bare, or so he thought. "You'll have to move out by the 1st, he said, checking his watch. "Chloe's decorator is anxious to get started. Don't take anything that isn't explicitly yours, which, as I recall, is just your clothes." The next 4 months were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Marcus, with the bulldog-like Bradley Fiscali at his side, waged a campaign of total annihilation. Sarah, following the script, didn't fight back. She hired a young, seemingly overwhelmed legal aid lawyer named David Chen, a man who looked perpetually stressed and out of his depth. This, too, was Gideon Croft's design. Chen was a brilliant junior associate from Croft's firm, playing the part of a public defender. The first hearing was for temporary alimony. Fiscali was magnificent in his cruelty. "Your Honor," he boomed, "Ms. Hayes Thorne is accustomed to a lifestyle her husband provided, a lifestyle, we now know, that was funded on the fumes of her father's failing empire. Mr. Thorne has graciously taken on this debt. To ask for alimony is to rub salt in an already gaping wound." The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Evelyn Reed, looked at Sarah. "Ms. Hayes, your response?" David Chen fumbled with his papers. Your Honor, my client. She needs to live. She has no income." "Did she not just inherit her father's estate?" It appears to be worthless, Your Honor," Chen stammered. The motion was denied. Sarah moved out of the 8,000-square-foot penthouse and into a 400-square-foot 3rd-floor walk-up in Somerville. The heating was suspect, and the walls were paper-thin. She sold her mother's jewelry, the few pieces Marcus hadn't collateralized, to pay for groceries. Marcus, it seemed, was not content with just winning. He needed to gloat. A week after she moved, a package arrived. It was from a high-end gourmet food service. Inside there was no food, just a single framed photo of Marcus and Chloe Jensen laughing on a yacht in St. Bart's. Taped to the glass was a note, written on Marcus's heavy, monogrammed stationery. "Sarah, thought you'd be hungry. Hope you're enjoying the simple life. M." A week later, he had her car repossessed, claiming it was a corporate vehicle. She started taking the bus. He was systematic. He called the chairs of the charity boards she sat on, explaining that Sarah was unwell and financially embarrassed, and that it was best she stepped down. Her social circle, built entirely on his connections, evaporated overnight. She was isolated. She was poor. She was, to the outside world, a tragic figure, a fallen socialite. Through it all, she met with Gideon Croft twice a week, in the back of a dusty, anonymous diner in Alston. "How are you holding up, Serafina?" Croft would ask, sliding a cup of coffee toward her. "He sent me a picture of his mistress," Sarah said, her voice flat. She was thinner, paler, but her eyes held a cold, hard light that hadn't been there before. The softness was gone. "He's arrogant, and arrogance makes a man stupid," Croft said. "Fiscali has filed the final motion. They're pushing for a final hearing. They want it over." "Why?" "He's won. What's the rush?" "He hasn't collected yet," Croft explained. "He believes he's in a race against your father's creditors. He needs the divorce finalized so he can legally separate his assets, our assets, as he sees them, from the debt of your father's estate. He needs that gavel to fall so he can lock you out for good." "And the Palm Beach condo?" Croft smiled, a rare, thin smile. "His lawyers found the mortgage. It's mortgaged to the hilt, just as he said. He's so proud of himself for giving it to you. He thinks he's saddling you with a property you can't afford, one that will go into foreclosure and ruin your credit." "And the truth?" "The truth," said Croft, "is that the mortgage is held by a shell corporation, the same shell corporation your father set up to hold the $850 million bond. You're not being given a debt, Serafina. You're being given the only unencumbered asset. It was the one true gift." Sarah looked down at her hands, chafed from the harsh soap in her new apartment. "My father was a genius." "He was a thorough man," Croft corrected. "Now, let's review the courtroom procedure. Mr. Chen will handle the preliminaries. You will agree to all terms. You will sign the papers. You must not, under any circumstances, show any emotion until after the judge has read Article 4. "Article 4, she repeated. The trap, he confirmed. The day of the final hearing, December 18th, was bitterly cold. Sarah wore her only decent outfit, a simple, charcoal grey wool dress she'd owned for a decade. It was slightly too large for her now. She wore no jewellery. She walked into courtroom 4B at the Suffolk County Courthouse alone, her cheap heels clicking nervously on the marble. Marcus was already there. He was a vision of victory. He wore a bespoke, navy blue Xenia suit that probably cost more than her apartment security deposit. He was flanked by Bradley Fiscali and two junior associates who looked like they'd been sculpted from ivory. In the back row of the gallery, her stomach clenched. It was Chloe Jensen. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere suit, texting, and occasionally looking up to smile at Marcus. She was bored, as if this were just a tedious errand before a champagne lunch. Marcus saw Sarah. He didn't just look at her. He scanned her, his eyes cataloguing her cheap dress, her pale face, her lack of adornment. He gave her a small, pitying smirk, and then turned back to Fiscali, whispering something that made his lawyer chuckle. All rise. The Honorable Judge Evelyn Reed, presiding. The courtroom stood. Judge Reed entered, her face a mask of stern neutrality. She sat and surveyed the room. We are here for the final dissolution of the marriage of Thorne versus Hayes. Mr. Fiscali, are we ready to proceed with the settlement? We are, Your Honor, Fiscali said, standing. We have a comprehensive settlement agreement, signed by my client. It is, I must say, extraordinarily generous, given the circumstances of the Hayes estate. He droned on, listing the assets. Mr. Thorne will assume ownership of the marital home at 145 Beacon Street. He will assume control of the art collection, valued at $30 million, as collateral against the estate's debts. He will retain all liquid assets, vehicles, and accounts. Ms. Hayes will receive the property at 2400 South Ocean Boulevard, Palm Beach, Florida, free and clear of any claim from Mr. Thorne. Furthermore, Mr. Thorne offers a one-time, good-faith alimony payment of $50,000. Judge Reed looked at Sarah's side of the table. Mr. Chen, your client agrees to these terms? David Chen stood, adjusting his ill-fitting suit jacket. Yes, Your Honor, we do. My client is anxious to move on. Marcus leaned back, steepling his fingers. He looked dominant, powerful. This was his kingdom. Very well, Judge Reed said. She looked at the gallery. This is a court of law, not a theatre. Ma'am in the back row, she gestured at Chloe. Put your phone away or I'll have you removed. Chloe flushed and dropped the phone into a Birkin bag. Now, the judge continued, I have the final decree here, but before we sign, the court has received a most unusual motion. Marcus and Fiscali shot straight up. A motion, Your Honor? Fiscali said, his voice sharp. From whom? Mr. Chen filed no motions. Not from Mr. Chen, Judge Reed said, her eyes scanning a document. The motion was filed this morning by a Mr. Gideon Croft, executor of the estate of Arthur Hayes. In the back row, a tall, imposing man in his late 70s stood up. It was Gideon Croft. He was not in a diner. He was in a $10,000 Savile Row suit, and he radiated an authority that sucked the air from the room. Mr. Croft, Fiscali sputtered, this is a divorce proceeding. Probate court is down the hall. You have no standing here. On the contrary, Mr. Fiscali, Croft's voice boomed, calm and clear. I have every standing. Your Honor, I filed a petition, which you have, to have the final testament of Mr. Hayes read into this record. The reason being, Article 4 and V of the will are contingent contractual clauses directly tied to the prenuptial agreement Mr. Thorne and Ms. Hayes both signed. Marcus went pale. The prenup? The prenup says I get nothing of hers, and she gets nothing of mine. It's void. Not void, Mr. Thorne, Judge Reed said, reading the petition. Just specific. The prenup you signed stated that all assets held prior to the marriage remain separate. It also contained a lifestyle clause, Clause 22B, stating that all assets acquired during the marriage would be divided according to the stipulations of Mr. Hayes's estate, should he die during the marriage. You signed it. That's illegal, Fiscali shouted. Is it, Mr. Fiscali? Croft asked, taking a step forward. Or did you just not do your due diligence? Did you just assume the old man was a fool? Marcus's face was a mottled red. This is a circus. I won't stand for it. Finalize the divorce. She agreed to the terms. I agree, Judge Reed said, silencing him. The divorce settlement as read stands on its own. The reading of the will is a separate, binding matter, to occur after the dissolution. We will proceed. Mr. Thorne, Ms. Hayes, please approach and sign the decree. This was the moment. The pivot. Marcus, breathing hard, was clearly furious. He saw this as a final, pathetic attempt by Sarah's people to muddy the waters. He thought it was a bluff, an empty threat to try and scare him. He just wanted it done. He strode to the table in front of the judge. Sarah rose and stood opposite him. Judge Reed pushed the thick vellum decree towards them. "Ms. Hayes, as the respondent, you will sign first." Sarah picked up the pen. Her hand was rock steady. She looked not at Marcus, but at the paper. She signed Seraphina Hayes with a clear, deliberate hand. She had dropped the thorn. She slid the paper to Marcus. Now it was his turn. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a toxic mix of contempt and triumph. He thought this was her last, desperate gasp. He picked up the pen, his own, a gaudy, gold-nibbed Mont Blanc. "This is it, Sarah," he whispered, loud enough for the judge to hear, but soft enough to be a personal slight. "Your last taste of the good life." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss that only she could hear. "I'm going to find that hovel you live in and buy the building just so I can evict you. Enjoy the bus, you pathetic." He turned to the paper. With a grand, arrogant flourish, he signed Marcus Aurelius Thorne right below her name. The signature was huge, a bold statement of ownership. He underlined it twice. He capped his pen. "There, done." He pushed the document back to the judge. "Now, can we get this will nonsense over with so I can get to lunch?" Judge Evelyn Reed looked at the two signatures. She looked at the clock on the wall. 2:17 p.m. She took her gavel and struck the block. The sound was as final as a gunshot. "The divorce is finalized as of 2:17 p.m. on December 18th. The marriage between Marcus Thorne and Seraphina Hayes is dissolved. The settlement is so ordered." Marcus smiled. He had won. He turned to wink at Chloe. Sarah did not move. She just watched the judge. "And now," Judge Reed said, her voice dropping, "we move to the matter of the estate. Mr. Croft, I have your certified copy of the will here. As executor, you have the right to read it, but given its binding nature on this court, I will read the relevant sections aloud myself." Gideon Croft nodded, standing in the front row now, next to David Chen. Fiscali sat down, rolling his eyes, whispering to Marcus, "It's just theatre. Relax." Judge Reed put on a pair of reading glasses. She opened the thick, wax-sealed envelope. "I, Arthur Hayes," she began, "being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this my final testament. I leave my collection of 19th century maritime maps to my friend Gideon Croft. I leave my dog, Bismarck, to my housekeeper, along with a stipend of $200,000 for his care." Marcus was checking his watch. "Ah," said the judge, "here we are. Article Waffa, regarding my daughter, Seraphina Hayes, and her husband, Marcus Thorne." Marcus sat up. Chloe stopped looking at her nails. Judge Reed cleared her throat and read, "I have never trusted Marcus Thorne. I knew he was a parasite from the day he met my daughter. He is a man of profound arrogance and shallow character." "Objection!" Fiscali yelled, leaping to his feet. "This is prejudicial and slanderous. It has no legal bearing." "It is the legal testament of the deceased, Mr. Fiscali," Judge Reed snapped. "It provides context for the bequests. You will sit down and be silent, or I will have you held in contempt. Is that clear?" Fiscali, red-faced, sat. The judge continued, "I knew Marcus would attempt to seize control of my daughter's inheritance. Therefore, I structured my affairs accordingly. Upon my death, all assets, liquid and fixed, of Hayes Strategic Holdings were not bequeathed to my daughter, Seraphina." Marcus let out a short, sharp laugh. He nudged Fiscali. "See, I told you, the old man cut her off. She gets nothing." Judge Reed looked at him over her glasses, her expression withering. She continued reading. Were not bequeathed to my daughter. Instead, they were placed into a 25-year, non-transferable corporate trust bond held by a neutral third party. This bond was valued upon my death at approximately $850 million, 850,000. The air left the room. You could hear Chloe Jensen inhale sharply. Marcus's smirk vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. What? A bond? But the debts? The insolvency? Misinformation, Mr. Thorne, Gideon Croft said from his seat. A breadcrumb trail for a rat. Judge Reed raised her hand for silence and kept reading. This bond contains a single, binding acceleration clause. This clause is to be triggered only by one event: the legal, finalized and uncontested dissolution of Seraphina's marriage to Marcus Thorne. Marcus's blood drained from his face. He looked at the signed paper. He looked at the judge. No, he whispered. No. At the precise moment, said divorce is finalized by a court of law. Judge Reed paused and looked at the clock again. Which it was. At 2:17 p.m. today. The $850 million bond is to be immediately and fully liquidated. The entire principal and all accrued interest is to be transferred, tax-free, as it is a trust disbursement, into a new, private holding company. The judge looked up from the will, the sole signatory, owner and director of which, she read, is my daughter, Seraphina Hayes. Sarah took her first deep, easy breath in a year. Marcus was fish-belly white. But the settlement, the assets, you get exactly what the settlement provides, Mr. Thorne, Judge Reed said. But my assets, the penthouse, the art, she can't touch them. The prenup, she gets hers, I get mine. We signed. He was raving, his voice cracking. Which brings us, Judge Reed said, her voice like ice, to Article 5, the marital assets. Marcus Thorne looked like a man who had just been shot. He was gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white. My assets are my assets. Judge, tell her. Judge Reed's eyes returned to the will. Her expression was unreadable. Article 5. I am aware my son-in-law, Marcus Thorne, is a man of expensive tastes. I am also aware that for the past 6 years he has systematically, and in his mind, cleverly embezzled funds from my company, which he believed to be my daughter's inheritance, to fund his lavish lifestyle. A lie! Fiscali shrieked, on his feet again. These are baseless accusations. He's defaming my client from the grave. Gideon Croft stood up. Your Honor, we have the wire transfers. We have the forensic accounting. Over $4.2 million in unauthorized withdrawals in the last 18 months alone. Including, he said, turning to look directly at Chloe Jensen, $75,000 for a condo down payment and monthly payments to a Ms. Chloe Jensen, totaling over $500,000. Chloe let out a small, strangled squeak and shrank in her seat. Marcus looked at her, then at Croft. He was cornered. But the settlement, he yelled, his voice desperate. The settlement gives me the house. It gives me the art. She signed it. You all saw it. She signed away her claim. You are correct, Mr. Thorne, Sarah said, her voice clear and cold, echoing in the stunned silence. It was the first time she had spoken. She had stood and was now facing him. I signed away my claim, just as the prenup you were so fond of stated. I have no claim to your assets. Exactly, he spat. But Marcus, she said, taking a step toward him, you don't have any assets. Judge Reed looked back at the will. Therefore let it be known, she read, that all assets acquired by Marcus Thorne during his marriage to my daughter, the Boston penthouse at 145 Beacon, the art collection he so adroitly collateralized, the fleet of vehicles, the very accounts he managed, were not marital property. Marcus stopped breathing. They were purchased, the judge continued, on loan. On loan, Fiscali whispered, his confidence completely gone. All of said assets were purchased using a corporate line of credit from a subsidiary of Hayes Strategic Holdings. Mr. Thorne, in his arrogance, simply signed the papers, believing he was drawing from his wife's allowance. In reality, he was signing a series of high-interest, fully collateralized corporate loans. The judge looked up, her gaze flat and devastating. As of 2:17 p.m. today, my daughter, Serafina Hayes, is now the 100% owner, creditor, and CEO of Hayes Strategic Holdings and all its subsidiaries. This means, Mr. Thorne, that all those loans, totaling 54.8 million huasas, are now due in full, payable to her, effective immediately. There was a heavy thud. Bradley Fiscali had dropped his $4,000 briefcase. The penthouse you live in, Mr. Thorne? Judge Reed clarified. It's hers. The $30 million art collection? It's hers. The Maybach in the garage? Hers. The liquid assets you were protecting? They were in a corporate account she now owns. The Zegna suit you're wearing? It was purchased on a corporate credit card, which she is now the owner of. Marcus Thorne swayed on his feet. He looked from the judge to Sarah. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. The trap hadn't just sprung, it had vaporized him. The $50,000 alimony, he stammered. The payment A gesture, Gideon Croft supplied, smiling, which Miss Hayes's new accounting team will graciously deduct from the $4.2 million in embezzled funds you owe her. That leaves you with a debt of $4,150,000, not including the $54.8 million in loans. We will, of course, be filing criminal charges for the embezzlement. Marcus collapsed into his chair. He was mute. He was ruined. Sarah walked from her table. She stopped in front of him. She looked down at the man who had mocked her, belittled her, and tried to destroy her. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He was staring at the wood grain of the table, his world reduced to a single, polished spot. The apartment in Palm Beach, Sarah said softly. The one mortgaged to hell. It was the only asset my father left in my personal name. It was the only thing I owned. And you tried to take it from me, just to be cruel. You tried to saddle me with a debt you thought I couldn't pay. She then turned to Mr. Fiscali, who was trying to blend into the wallpaper. Mr. Fiscali, my lawyer, Mr. Chen, and my new counsel, Mr. Croft, will be in touch with you regarding the immediate seizure of all assets listed in the loan agreements, which is, well, everything. Security is already at the penthouse, changing the locks. I expect Mr. Thorne's personal effects, and those of his guest, to be on the sidewalk by 4 p.m. She looked at Chloe Jensen, who was crying silently into her hands. Ms. Jensen, my lawyers will also be in touch. Or perhaps the IRS. Gifts of over $500,000 are, I believe, taxable. Finally, she looked back at Marcus. His face was ashen, his eyes hollow. The mockery was gone, replaced by a terrible, bottomless emptiness. Sarah leaned in, just as he had done, her voice a low, sharp whisper that only he could hear. "Oh, and Marcus," she said. He slowly, fearfully, looked up. "Enjoy the bus." Serafina Hayes did not look back. She walked out of courtroom 4B, followed by Gideon Croft and a suddenly very confident-looking David Chen. The doors swung shut behind her, sealing Marcus Thorne inside with the wreckage of the life he had stolen. The hallway was quiet. Sarah leaned against the wall, and for the first time, a single tear traced a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was the release of a year of tension, of fear, of playing the part of the victim. "It's done, child," Gideon said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's done," she agreed. She wiped the tear away, her backbone straightening. The pale, trembling woman was gone. In her place was Serafina Hayes, CEO. "All right, Gideon. What's next?" "First," Gideon said, a glint in his eye, "we go to the office, the real office." Inside the courtroom, chaos erupted. You're incompetent!" Marcus shrieked at Fiscali, his voice a broken, hysterical thing. "You let this happen. You were supposed to be the best." "How could I know?" Fiscali blustered, sweat pouring down his face. This is legal malice. It's a conspiracy. We'll appeal. We'll... "Appeal what, Mr. Fiscali?" Judge Reed said, standing. "That your client was outsmarted. That he signed a binding contract he didn't bother to read. That his own greed was the trigger, as Mr. Hayes so eloquently put it. You have no grounds. This ruling is final." She banged the gavel. "This court is adjourned." As Judge Reed swept from the room, Marcus was left alone at the table, his high-priced lawyer already packing his briefcase, edging away. "Marcus," Fiscali said, "about my retainer, given the, frozen assets." "Get out," Marcus whispered. "I'll, send you a final bill." Fiscali fled the room, practically running. Marcus was alone, except for one person. Chloe Jensen was standing by the door, her face white with fury. "You!" she hissed. "You told me she was nothing. You told me you had it all." "Chloe, baby, listen," he started, standing up, his hands outstretched. We can figure this out." "Figure what out? The IRS? The 4.2 million? They're going to come after me. You used me. You put it all in my name. I was protecting us. You were protecting you, and you failed," she screamed, the last word echoing. "I'm ruined. You ruined me." She threw her phone at him. It hit him in the chest. She turned and ran out of the courtroom, her heels hammering in a staccato of panic. Marcus stood there, completely and utterly alone. He looked down. His hands were shaking. He reached into his pocket for his keys to go to his car. He remembered Sarah's words. His car. Her car. He reached for his phone to call his bank. Her bank. He sank back into the chair. For the first time, Marcus Aurelius Thorne, the man who had mocked his wife for being penniless, had a horrifying, sickening realization. He didn't have cab fare. Serafina Hayes didn't look back. She didn't need to. The image of Marcus Thorne, slack-jawed and shattered, was burned into her memory, not as a victory, but as a closing entry in a long-overdue ledger. As the courtroom doors swung shut, the sound was not a slam, but a satisfying, heavy click, like a vault being sealed. Gideon Croft and David Chen fell into step on either side of her. Chen was practically vibrating, his overwhelmed lawyer persona shed, revealing the sharp, adrenaline-filled energy of a litigator who had just won the Super Bowl. "That," Chen breathed, "was art. The look on Fiscali's face. I'm going to have that framed." "Calmly, David," Gideon said, though a rare, deep smile touched his own lips. "The work is only beginning." He guided Sarah toward the elevators, bypassing the press who were already swarming the courtroom doors, catching the scent of blood. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, her voice quiet. "We're going home," Gideon replied. They didn't go to a diner. They didn't go to a law office. A black, unadorned Audi A8 was waiting at the curb. It glided through Boston traffic and pulled into a private, unmarked garage beneath a grey granite building in the financial district, a building Marcus had passed 1,000 times and never once noticed. The elevator opened not onto a lobby, but into a high-tech command center that felt more like a NORAD bunker than a holding company. This was the real Hayes Strategic Holdings. It had never been insolvent. It had never been in debt. It was a fortress of quiet, old-world capital. A woman with a sleek, dark bob and a sharp, silver-grey suit, Priya Singh, the real CFO, met them. She didn't smile. She just nodded, her eyes full of sharp, analytical respect. "Ms. Hayes," she said, "welcome. The board is waiting." "Priya," Sarah acknowledged, her voice crisp. Priya gestured to a massive, wall-mounted screen. "Operation Vulture's Nest is complete, ma'am. The trigger was pulled at 14:17 hours. "Show me," Sarah said. The screen lit up with a dashboard. "The bond liquidation is finalized," Priya reported, her voice precise. "The principal and all accrued interest have been successfully transferred from the trust in Zurich. The new holding company, Hayes Restoration LLC, is now solvent. Total liquid assets, as of 2 minutes ago, 892,409 nows 234. David Chen let out a low whistle. Sarah just nodded. "The asset seizure. Phase 2 is active." Priya tapped a key, and the screen split. "Team Alpha is at 145 Beacon. Locks are changed. The premises are secure. We have 2 Boston PD officers present as witnesses." A new window popped up. Team Bravo has secured the garage. The Maybach, the Ferrari, and the Range Rover are being loaded onto transports for a secure holding facility. Another window. Team Charlie is at Mr. Thorne's leased office. All hardware is being impounded, as per the loan agreement. It was all purchased on the corporate line of credit. "And the honeypot account?" Sarah asked. Priya's expression hardened. "The $4.2 million in embezzled funds, fully documented. We traced every dollar, from the consulting fees to Ms. Jensen, to the undeclared gifts. We have wire transfers, receipts for jewelry, even the down payment on her condo. The file is complete." "Gideon," Sarah said, turning to him. "It's already filed," Gideon said, checking his phone. "The district attorney's office received our file electronically at 14:18 hours. A warrant for Mr. Thorne's arrest on charges of felony embezzlement and wire fraud is being drawn up as we speak." "And Miss Jensen?" "A team is with her now," Gideon said. "She's been given a choice: full cooperation as a witness for the prosecution and the return of every single asset, or she will be named as a co-conspirator. Given the evidence, she'll sing." Sarah looked at the screens, at the web of her father's brilliant, ruthless plan. He had not only protected her, he had handed her a loaded gun, a guilty verdict, and an empire, all in one motion. "Priya," Sarah said, her voice ringing with new authority, "begin liquidation of all assets tied to the Thorne Prestige Fund. Marcus built it to impress people at Davos. It's all flash, no foundation. I want us 100% liquid by morning. I'm redirecting that capital." "To where, Mum?" "To the new biotech division my father was researching, and to my art foundation, the future and the past." She turned to the board, the old wise men who had served her father for 40 years. "Gentlemen, thank you for your stewardship. Let's get to work." While Sarah was taking command of her empire, Marcus was stumbling into his personal hell. He exited the courthouse into the bitter 4 p.m. darkness of a Boston December. The air was frigid, cutting through his thin Zegna suit. He was in a daze, his mind a roaring static of denial. "This is illegal. A trick. Slander. I'll sue. I'll destroy Croft. I'll destroy her." He walked to his private parking spot. The Maybach was gone. In its place was a tow truck, just locking the gate. "Hey, you! Where's my car? That's my spot!" The driver, a burly man in a greasy jumpsuit, spat on the ground. "Car's been seized, pal. Order of the court." "Seized by who?" Marcus roared. Hayes Strategic Holdings, the man read off a clipboard. Says so right here. You, Thorne? You can't do this. Already did. The man got in his truck and drove off, leaving Marcus in a cloud of diesel exhaust. His hands were shaking. Fine, I'll take a cab. He pulled out his phone. He had to call Fiscali. He had to call his bank. He dialed Fiscali. Straight to voicemail. This is Bradley Fiscali. I am unavailable. Coward! Marcus screamed, leaving a message. Call me. You're fired. You're disbarred. You're... He tried to open his banking app. A red banner. Account frozen. Pending legal and criminal investigation. The blood drained from his face. Criminal? He tried his Amex app. Card cancelled. He was standing on the street, a man worth, on paper, tens of millions, and he couldn't get a cab. He started to walk. The wind was a physical blow, and his expensive hand-stitched Italian shoes were not made for this. He walked the 2 miles to Beacon Street, his rage and denial warring with a new, creeping, abject terror. She can't lock me out of my own home. He arrived, his feet aching, his face numb. 2 broad-shouldered security guards, men he'd never seen, stood in the lobby. They wore black suits with a small, discreet HS logo on the lapel. I live here. Marcus Thorne, he announced, trying to project the authority that was rapidly leaking out of him. You are not permitted on the premises, Mr. Thorne, the first guard said, his voice a bored monotone. You are to cease and desist. This is my home, my property. I'll have you arrested for trespassing. No, sir, the guard said, unmoved. We are here at the request of the new owner, Ms. Serafina Hayes. The police have already been here. They confirmed the court order. You are trespassing. My things, Marcus stammered, the fight going out of him. My clothes, my passport. I need my passport. The second guard stepped forward and handed him a single, sealed manila envelope. Ms. Hayes had us retrieve your personal documents, sir. Your passport, social security card, and birth certificate. She was specific. Marcus ripped it open. They were there. And so was one other thing. A single $100 bill. What's this? He whispered. From Ms. Hayes, sir, for a cab. And I was told to give you this message. She hopes you enjoy the bus. The mockery. The pity. It was worse than the seizure. It was the final, devastating humiliation. I'll be back, he hissed, his voice breaking. I'll be back with the police. This isn't over. Actually, Mr. Thorne, the first guard said. It is. The police are on their way. For you. I'd suggest you take that cab. Far away. A siren wailed in the distance. Marcus looked at the $100 bill. He looked at the penthouse he would never enter again. He looked at the approaching flashing lights. He turned and ran. He spent that night and the next 2 weeks in a $70-a-night motel near Logan Airport, paid for with that $100 bill and the last $120 cash in his wallet. He watched his entire life be dismantled on the local news. His downfall was the lead story. His financial genius was reframed as a lucky, sociopathic fraud. Chloe Jensen gave a tearful interview, painting herself as a victim of his coercive control, detailing how he'd lied to her, just as he'd lied to his wife. Bradley Fiscali was suspended by the bar, pending a malpractice investigation. When the money ran out, the motel kicked him out. His trial date was set. He was assigned a public defender. The charges, 14 counts of wire fraud and felony embezzlement. The civil debt, $60.2 million. He was, in every legal and financial sense, a non-person. 6 months passed. The story of Marcus Thorne's fall was replaced by the story of Serafina Hayes' rise. The new CEO of Hayes Strategic Holdings was a revelation. She didn't just manage her father's empire, she transformed it. She sold off the volatile, high-risk funds Marcus had so admired and poured hundreds of millions into two divisions: the Hayes-Sarah Biotech Initiative, funding cutting-edge cancer research, and the Hayes Restoration Foundation, her true passion. She sold the cold glass and steel penthouse on Beacon Street. She bought a warm, historic brownstone on Louisburg Square and a restoration studio in the South End, where, twice a week, she still went herself, in jeans and an apron, to work on a 16th-century canvas. She was, in her own right, one of the most powerful and respected women in the city. The Restoration Foundation's inaugural gala was the event of the season. It was held in the new wing of the Museum of Fine Arts, a wing she had just funded. Sarah was unrecognizable. She wore a floor-length gown of striking fiery red silk. It was a dress of power, of victory. Her hair was up, revealing the strong line of her jaw. She was laughing, moving through a crowd of senators, tech billionaires and philanthropists. She was not their guest. She was their queen. She was on the dais, having just announced a new $50 million grant for art preservation when a commotion shattered the elegant atmosphere. It wasn't just a shout, it was a crash. A man had shoved his way past security and knocked over a champagne tower. Glasses shattered. Women screamed. "Sarah, you bitch!" The crowd parted, horrified. It was Marcus, but it wasn't. The man who had stood in court, proud and pristine in his Zegna suit, was gone. This man was a ghost. He was gaunt, his skin a sickly, sallow grey. He was wearing a cheap, stained polyester suit that hung off his skeletal frame. His hair was matted, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He reeked of cheap whiskey and desperation. He was out on bail, awaiting his sentencing. "You can't just erase me," he shrieked, his voice a broken, raw thing. Security was on him, but he tore free for one last, desperate lunge. "It was mine! You did this! You and your bastard father! It was a setup! You took everything!" The music stopped. The entire gala was silent. A senator put a protective arm in front of Sarah. She calmly held up a hand. The security team paused. She wanted this. This was the final, ragged epilogue. She picked up the microphone and walked to the edge of the stage, the spotlight following her, illuminating her in red and him in the shadows below. "Erase you, Marcus," she said, her voice amplified, clear as a bell. "No, you were never really there to begin with. I loved you," he whimpered, the lie pathetic and thin. "It was all for us. Your father, he poisoned you. He was a monster." Sarah looked down at him, her expression not one of anger, but of a kind of profound, clinical pity. "My father," she said, her voice cutting through the silence, "was a complicated man. But he was a man who saw the world exactly as it was. And he saw you, exactly as you were. A man who confuses value with price. A man who thinks a signature is an act of power, not an act of responsibility." She took a step closer. "You accuse me of erasing you? You spent 8 years trying to erase me. You told me I was nothing. You dismissed my passion as a hobby. You tried to medicate my intelligence and lock away my strength. You reduced me to a name you could leverage. You didn't erase me, Marcus. You just forgot who I was. It's my money." He lunged again, desperate. "I earned it." This time, security was on him, tackling him to the polished marble floor. He was raving, struggling like a trapped animal. You'll pay for this." Sarah looked down at the pathetic, struggling man. Her voice dropped, but the microphone caught every cold, precise word. "You never earned anything. You took. You stole. You mocked. You stood in that courtroom, laughing, so certain you had won. You were so busy savoring your victory, you didn't realize that the document you signed, it wasn't a settlement. It was a confession. It was the key to your own prison. She looked at him, truly looked at him. One last time. The hollow man. My father built the trap, it's true. But you, Marcus, you were the one who walked right in. You were the one who pulled the trigger. Your own mockery, your own cruelty, that was the bait. "I'll see you in hell, Sarah," he shrieked as they finally dragged him out, his cheap shoes scraping the floor. The hall was tomb quiet. Sarah watched the doors close. It was, finally, over. She turned back to the shocked, silent crowd. A small, sad smile touched her lips. She raised her champagne flute. "My apologies," she said, her voice bright and strong. "As I was saying, my father taught me that the most valuable things in life are the ones you can't put a price on. But," she added, a glint in her eye, "he also taught me to always get a receipt." The hall erupted, first in nervous laughter, then in thunderous, sustained applause. Sarah smiled, took a sip of champagne, and turned to the orchestra. "Please, continue." The music swelled, and the gala resumed. Sarah turned away from the door and greeted the mayor, her back straight, her empire secure, and her future, finally, her own. This wasn't just a divorce. It was a hostile takeover. Marcus Thorne made the classic mistake of the arrogant. He mistook kindness for weakness. He thought he was robbing a museum, only to find out he was trapped in a bank vault designed by a master. Serafina's father built the perfect trap, but it was Marcus's own mockery, his own greed, and his own signature that sprang it. He mocked her one last time, and it cost him everything. What do you think of Arthur's plan? Was it justice, or was it the coldest revenge? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you loved this story of shocking twists and karmic justice, make sure to hit that like button. Share it with a friend who loves a good revenge story, and subscribe for more real-life drama you won't want to miss.